Recording now. Okay.
Okay, I call the Natural Resources Committee meeting on, what is the date? July 8th to order. This COVID stuff's got me totally off.
Great.
And if you don't mind me asking, who are we joined by today?
Yeah. Thanks for pulling up that agenda. Oh, we're being joined by, sorry, back to where we were. Wayne Hall and Kim Southworth. Is that correct, Kim?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Landowners where the Trimble Creek property is in the Beaver Creek Road concept plan area, Beaver Creek Road. So they're here to talk, to listen in about the habitat discussion.
Indeed. Welcome.
So the agenda that we have tonight, the first item up was the draft permitting and notification process for tree removal on institutional and city-owned land. Is everybody okay with that going first?
Sure.
Okay. All right. I am going to share my screen somewhere else.
Can you?
Where is it?
Well, wave hi real quick. Okay, now let me do this.
Can you see that?
Yeah, I do now.
Yep, we see it.
Yep.
Did it just get bigger?
Yes.
Yeah, that's great.
It's full screen.
Okay. All right. Great. So I just want to give you an update on the discussions that we've had with the City Commission and Planning Commission. Last night we had a work session with City Commission about this process. And I'm going to go through the slides that I presented to them, which I just modified a little bit to reflect the direction that they gave staff last night, but it'll include the same content that we were talking about. So let me get started. So this process began with the direction of the city manager's office. In response to tree removal on city property, there was a desire on the part of this community and the city commission to develop a process for notification and additional mitigation for tree removal on city-owned properties. And that direction came from the city manager in late 2019. The intent was to use certain tree species size and thresholds as a trigger for further review if a tree was being removed by the city on city property. And in response to that, we would develop a public notice process based on these new requirements. We would have an internal approval process. We'd be reviewing our public works standards to see if there's ways to preserve existing large trees rather than have to have them removed for development process purposes. And also to train all staff of all departments on the current code requirements for tree removal, because we have 3 departments that jointly work together to manage the trees canopy of the city in addition to homeowners. And then involve each of the departments in the code amendment and policy process. The City Commission last night, what we asked them to do was to clarify for us whether they want this to be an internal policy applicable to only city-owned land, or do they want us to make this a codified code amendment process applicable to institutional land? The reason that we asked that is because we're currently doing several pretty staff resource heavy projects in particular the Oregon City Comprehensive Plan update, which has just begun. The direction from the City Commission was to just adopt an internal policy for now applicable to city-owned land. And this will be the same process that we've been talking about, in addition to the current permitting process that we already have. The advantage of doing this is it will allow us to kind of be a pilot program. We don't need to do any exhaustive code amendments right now or public hearings. We can implement this fairly quickly based on our current workload, and allow us as 3 departments to work together to provide a coordinated proposal for further review in fall of 2020. And as you'll see in the next slides, we did get comments from Parks Department and Public Works with some concerns about where we were heading originally. So there had been direction from the City Commission to apply this policy to all institutional properties in the city. They kind of walked that back last night for the time being. They do want us to continue to look at reusing wood from removed trees and requiring larger caliber replacement trees rather than very smaller 2-inch caliper trees. As you all know, this is based on a new definition that we were putting into the code originally for public property, and that was a very broad definition. It included a lot of government-owned property as well as public utility properties and educational properties, including the Clackamas Community College and Oregon City School District and public right-of-way. So that was the original intent, but for the time being, we won't be making that code change. The Natural Resources Committee had given me the following direction. You guys have talked about this more than once, and I want to make sure that I got all of your recommendations. And if there are others that come out of this as we move forward, we can certainly add them. Initially, the initial agreement was that yes, the heritage tree table in our code is a good basis for additional notification and permitting. We wanted to add Pacific Madrone to the heritage tree eligibility table at 5 inches diameter. You're recommending that policy not be applied to habitat restoration projects that have city approval, such as Mule Creek Canyon and Kenema Bluffs. There's concern that, dead standing trees and snags be left behind for wildlife habitat, and that downed woody material be left on site when it can be used for habitat improvement. You recommended, as did the Planning Commission, that the notice period be increased from 7 days to 14 days. And if you have other recommendations as we go through this, please let me know. This is the table in chapter 12.32 of Oregon City Municipal Code. As you can see, we are adding Pacific Madrone to that table for eligibility at 5 inches diameter because it is a smaller tree. It's quite rare and difficult to establish. Planning Commission comments from 22nd of June. They had some questions about how the notice process would work, and if there are unresolved questions that are left at the end of the notice period, those would be forwarded to the city manager's office. So there's still some question about how those would be handled. Our expectation is that the majority of questions will be able to be handled by staff during the notice period. We're going to be providing public notice posted on the trees as well as on the city website. Planning Commission really liked the idea of being able to subscribe to a listserv for notification on tree removals. They did mention that with respect to the concern from the Parks Department about how smaller diameter replacement trees are better in terms of cost and variety and diversity and establishment, they would like to hear some expert testimony on that. They recommended that firewood be used as a last resort, or maybe that was the NRC, but the Planning Commission did recommend that. No, it was the Planning Commission. And they wanted to include county in the definition of public lands. Public Works Department Director John Lewis had provided a memorandum on the 30th of June, which detailed some of the concerns that their department had because they're responsible for maintenance of approximately 1,000 pieces of property that are outside the natural resources overlay district. They have limited resources for tree management, and they're responsible for complying with stormwater requirements as well as maintaining flow through the city's stormwater system. So there's a balance that they have to strike between those requirements and the aesthetics and natural resource values associated with drainages throughout the city. There was definitely concern from Public Works about the requirement to provide an arborist report in every situation, especially for volunteer trees, which are just growing naturally and not planted formally in the right-of-way. And they do have some additional concerns in general about our permitting process, but for the foreseeable future, we're not changing the code. So our permit process applicable to tax lots and the right-of-way and the current chapters that we apply for tree removal will apply just as much to the city as they do to any private developer. So their recommendation was that we do stay with the current code and not burden the department with additional notification and mitigation requirements. However, if we move forward with a resolution for an internal policy that is applicable to city land, that will affect the Public Works Department and it will affect the Parks Department as well. The Parks Department staff comments were predominantly having to do with the caliper size mandate of a very large tree, which of 2.5 inch caliper. Because they do use bare root stock, which has certain advantages in terms of establishment. And they wanted to make the point that bigger replacement trees are not always better because of establishment. But the City Commission, I think, generally felt that if we're removing large mature trees, we need to do our best to try to reestablish as large a tree as possible. So that was the consent that we got from the City Commission last night on that. Just a brief review of the policy steps that we'll be putting into place. The first thing would be to determine whether or not a tree is exempt from this policy. And currently that would include imminent hazard trees, trees that are causing a tripping hazard with sidewalks and that sort of thing, removal of invasive species, trees that are being removed as part of an approved restoration project or wildlife habitat enhancement project, and tree removal on federal property. Federal property is, we can't regulate it. They can voluntarily comply with our codes, but they're not required to. And this would be applicable to like the post office or the Social Security Administration, and possibly the National Park Service, who manages the McLaughlin House. Next step would be to obtain an arborist report to document the condition of the tree, and also to include an alternatives analysis to evaluate whether or not that tree can be saved and what methods could be used in order to do that and what the cost of those methods would be. Then standard process that we currently have, they have to apply for a permit. We have 1, 2, 3, 4. We have at least 6 chapters of code that regulate tree removal. The main ones having to do with the public right-of-way are chapter 12.08, and for development properties, chapter 17.41. But we also have the overlay districts, the Geologic Hazard Overlay District, the Willamette River Greenway District, the Natural Resources Overlay District, and then we have our site plan and design review requirements for landscaping on commercial properties. So those things are all triggers and permit requirements that we currently require permits for. The notice process would then be 7 to 14 days. And then that would be followed by a decision for removal of the tree and mitigation and reuse of the wood to the extent practicable. So that's a recap of where we're going. And so it's still it is still a work in progress. Laura, did you have any other things to add from the discussion last night about this?
No. Good evening, Laura Turway, Community Development Director for the city. So I support our planning and building departments. No, that was a good summary. Sounds like we'll be coming back with a more refined policy.
Yeah.
And just sorting the requests from Public Works and Parks with the direction from the commission.
Is the arborist report only required for like trees that would meet the heritage criteria, or is it all trees?
The way the policy is written right now, if a tree is eligible as a heritage tree and is proposed for removal, then an arborist report will be required. But there's some disagreement among the departments about that requirement. So we're going to need to get together with the departments and sort through some specific exemptions and take those forward before you and discuss them. And probably end up discussing what needs to be in the arborist report as a minimum content as well, because it's not just a condition analysis, it's an alternatives analysis, and that adds cost. Mm-hmm.
One additional item that we would set up to support this policy would be a dedicated fund so that we know how much money we have to put towards the alternative analysis so that people will actually implement some of these alternatives. Right.
Yeah, because there was some discussion about, for example, the very stringent thresholds that are imposed by the Americans with Disabilities Act, and how even a 1/4-inch lip creates a tripping hazard under the code, and those kinds of things. And that creates quite a liability for a homeowner who's responsible for abutting the sidewalk and the trees. Sometimes, the trees are the principal cause of sidewalk lifts. So the discussion kind of broadened into a discussion about street tree removal in general, rather than a more focused discussion about tree removal on city property. But that is a concern of the city commission as well. I'm not sure that we can do anything about ADA requirements because those are federal and they're driven by the Department of Justice, I believe. So, but at the same time, they would like the city to explore alternatives to tree removal that might include grinding down sidewalk lips without having to completely re-pour a sidewalk panel, using rubber sidewalks and other technologies, as long as they're cost effective. But the interesting thing is that there's nothing in the code right now that mandates that. It would have, right now, it's the rare homeowner that voluntarily wants to save a tree and is willing to pay for the additional design that it might take to preserve that tree. So, such as a meandering sidewalk and that sort of thing. So that's going to be a challenge. Mm-hmm.
When I replaced my sidewalk on the Jackson Street part of it, there was a large maple that had been planted by the county, I don't know how many years ago. And the guy who came out to permit the sidewalk actually suggested making a circular indent in the sidewalk while we were pouring it to help the tree out, and that's been good. So.
Oh yeah, see that I've seen quite a bit, and it seems like a fairly cost-effective way to maintain whatever the 4-foot clearance is for for the pedestrians and still create some space for the roots. Yeah, good point.
Worked really well.
And how big is that maple tree?
It's gotten pretty big. It's probably 30 feet high now, and it's getting probably about 8-10 inches around. It's a sugar maple, I think, so it turns bright red in the fall. It's beautiful.
How old is it?
25 years, 30
Okay.
years.
Yeah. All right. Are there any other questions or comments?
Yeah, actually, I had a few quick questions.
Good.
First of all, I'm curious if the Parks Department shared any of the misgivings about the policy recommendations as the Public Works Department. And
Go ahead.
no, it's a separate question. It would take us down a different path there. But yeah, I'm curious to hear the answer here.
Well, they had emailed us some comments earlier. They didn't provide a full written memorandum, but they did echo, they had reviewed the Public Works Department's memo and they had some of the same concerns.
Okay.
But I think there's further communication going to come forward from the Parks Department. What I shared with you on that slide was the only communication that we've had from Parks so far. Yes.
Gotcha. But there isn't necessarily a consensus among all of the affected departments.
We're working towards that. Yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Cool. And second, I was curious what it would take to get a certified arborist on the staff for the city. Say, in one of those departments.
That's a good question.
Yeah, on third party all the time.
You know, in the past, we've talked about this a lot and, you know, there's been numbers bandied around. I think, you know, it's not just the process of hiring an arborist, it's also the additional code enforcement that you need to ramp up for, because if you're going to apply a more stringent approach to tree permitting on private property, especially the majority of the residential properties in Oregon City, we don't regulate other than the street trees. You know, that's probably at least 1.5 to 2 full-time equivalent staff. You know, that's kind of the estimate. But we haven't really explored that in more detail. But there's definitely an enforcement component that needs to be taken into account when you're doing that. And then the structure of what the role of the arborist is has to be thought out too. You know, what are they responsible for? Are they looking at all the city trees, or are they just looking at certain city trees? Are they still, is the burden of management of the trees still going to be with the property owner the way it is in a lot of cities that have limited funding? You know, I think in Portland, the role of the city forester is essentially to make recommendations on appeals of tree removal decisions, but perhaps Nancy knows a little bit more about that, because, but yeah, there's still going to be a need for abutting homeowners to be responsible for street trees, is my sense. It's not like the city's going to take that over.
Gotcha.
I really don't know anything about specifically what the city does. And I know that they have, you know, a broader agenda of preserving their urban forests as much as they can. And I think he may do some things, but I don't know specifically what his job description is. So
Right. And without getting too much into the weeds on this, I know that, you know, their tree inspectors are also trained in public works standards, so they can look at a tree root that's a problem and say, if you cut that root, will it be destabilizing to the tree to such a point that the tree really ought to be removed, and that kind of thing. And they can only do that for so many times, but sometimes that's possible. So the problem root goes away. Anyway, I digress. Thanks for the input. Any other questions, Chris?
Can you hear me? I came in late.
Hi, Doug. Yeah, we can hear you.
And maybe this is covered, but is there any distinction on this in trees that are in heritage groves? I mean, I think we have the one at Waterboard Park. I don't know if we have any others or not.
Well, I think in terms of triggering the process, we're generally always talking about individual trees. So, I'm not sure there's going to be a situation where, the city is proposing removal of an entire grove. But the process would be the same. Additional notification and mitigation requirements. Anything else? Okay. I'm going to end this. How do I stop? Okay. All right. So second item was going to be Thimble Creek, sorry.
Is she muted?
Muted.
Good evening, everybody. Laura Titterway, Community Development Director for the City of Oregon City. Thanks for having me. I wanted to talk a little bit about Thimble Creek Upland Habitat Overlay District. Before we get into it, just a little bit of history. This area is within the concept plan, formerly known as Beaver Creek Road Concept Plan. And back in 2008, we had a metro inventory of our habitat areas. There were a couple of habitat areas specifically that were identified as having some resources on them. The city went ahead and mapped these areas. They didn't fall within any overlay districts. So here's a map that shows the yellow, which is our geologic hazards overlay district. So we have provisions for tree mitigation. The purple that you'll see is our natural resources overlay district. So we have standards for mitigation there too. And there are these little bits and pieces that fall outside of the overlay district. And so at the last city commission meeting, the hearing on June 16th, the city commission directed staff to work quickly to implement a new overlay district for the trees in areas 3 and 4, which are these areas here. And so that is what we are here to start to talk about. There is no way in our code where we could regulate tree removal using our existing overlay districts or tree protections in the way that the commission wanted. And so that's why this requires doing a new overlay district. There's some unknowns. This habitat area hasn't been looked at since the original inventory. And so the city is unaware of how much of it still exists, what the quality of that habitat is. And by habitat, I want to clarify that we're just talking about trees. We're not talking about shrubs or any other habitat for critters. The commission was provided clear guidance related to just trees, which is how it was kind of based off the aerial photos in the first place. So what I'm looking for today is some initial direction from the Natural Resources Committee about how we go about creating this new overlay district and what that looks like. So there's 2 options. And maybe there's more. I'm happy to hear everyone's opinions and feedback and see if we can create more if we need to. So the first option is really a more simplistic approach, which is, as Pete was alluding to, there's 6 chapters of the code that already regulate tree removal. This is working on creating a 7th, and that's in addition to the city tree removal policy Pete just talked about last time. So we have a chapter that says if you remove a tree, you've got to mitigate for that tree removal. And it's chapter 1741 of the code. The trick with that one is that it applies to all trees in the city, but only sometimes. It applies to trees on commercial property all the time, and it only applies to trees on residential property when they're doing a land division or going through some type of process with us. It doesn't apply to them after the land division is complete or before it starts. So
What does it apply to farms?
We can talk in just a minute about farm provisions. There are sections of our code that have provisions to allow tree farms separate and exempt from certain sections of our code. One thing I'm acknowledging, this little strip that we're talking about is outside the overlay districts, and so it's currently not regulated unless it's by this chapter 1741. So on your property, which is, let me go back here. So the Wayne and Kim are owners of this. There's a little slice here and this property here. So this property is in the process of being rezoned. The City Commission has already approved it, and effective August 1st, this property will be rezoned to multiple zones, but most of the majority of the property will be zoned commercial, some type of institutional or industrial or commercial type zoning designation. And so that means that the standards for tree removal that apply to all other commercial properties will then apply to them as well. So if one of the things we can do is take 1741, which is the tree mitigation requirements, and apply them all the time to all the properties. Well, one of the problems with that is that it already applies to that northern piece. It won't apply for the most part to the southern pieces unless they're going through a land division. If we apply it though, there's nothing in any section of our code ever that says that we can deny a tree removal. It's really just a matter of what's your mitigation to make up for your tree removal. And so that if we take this approach, that would be the result, is that we're discouraging tree removal with mitigation. It's easy because you can look at a chart and you can say, how big is the tree that we're removing? And based on that diameter, that will clearly tell you how many trees you need for mitigation. So it's clear to implement for both the city and for applicants as well. Because it doesn't require anyone to review any health of any tree, they don't need to hire consultants, nor do we for anything. The problem with this though is it doesn't prohibit tree removal. It's more simplistic pay to play approach. And then again, the problem that we also referenced earlier was that it doesn't do anything for the property on the northern piece where it already applies. So this is the simple approach. We sort of take code and apply it to this specific area and say that this tree mitigation applies all the time. If we want to, we can increase the amount of tree mitigation required if we feel that that makes more sense too. So you don't have to just cut and paste. We can tweak things if we need to as well. So option 2 is a bit more intense. So if you can think about it in how we implement the natural resources overlay district. So what we really want to do is, in this approach, is draw a line around these tree areas or the habitat, upland habitat areas, and we want to preserve them with a tract or an easement, and that means that people can't build there. And there's a little bit of a balancing that has to happen because the concept plan in general identifies the need for development in a minimum number of housing or businesses to happen. And so in this approach, we're mitigating the fact that they can't develop because they have to preserve the trees with density bonuses in other places. So if you could have got 10 lots of a subdivision, but you have to preserve trees, so you only get 8, then you can still have 10 houses, but they're going to be squished together a little bit more. Maybe one is a duplex, or the other lot sizes are all just generally smaller, so you still get the same outcome. So that's in this option. The pros are that we can require trees to be maintained and not removed. So we're putting them in a track, and if we want to create standards that say you can't remove this at all unless it's dead, diseased, or dying, or hazardous, I mean, we can set the threshold of what that standard for removal within these easement or track areas can be. And you can always use tables similar to the ones we referenced before for mitigation. So depending on how big, you can set out a clear standard for if a tree was to be removed, how that mitigation would happen. And then also the easement or tracks could be recorded so that it could go on to future property owners and be clear on a plat or something like that. The cons are that this is a little bit difficult because we're creating a new overlay district from scratch, and we're creating new standards from scratch. It could be a little bit difficult for people to implement, depending on if we create standards that require arborists to review the trees or things like that, then that would be an additional expense applicants or property owners would have to incur. And then also the northern piece of it, since it's not going to be zoned for residential, it's not as useful for density transfers because they may not want to go as high as we allow or things like that. They're not getting additional dwelling units out of it, but the market might not totally be there to go extra tall if they're doing industrial. So those are the two options. So again, there's this north piece, which is, as of August 1st, will be rezoned to be more industrial-esque. And then, although there'll be multiple zoning designations.
I thought it was houses.
What's that?
I thought it was houses
No,
under Christina.
you have a small slice of area at the bottom that is, but most of it's not. I sent you the zoning and the comp plan map earlier today. And I can pull that up. But this southern piece here is all residential, so they would benefit from the density transfer. So
yeah, why
really,
the bias down there?
what's that?
Why the bias down for the golf course?
That's just how they set up the map for the concept plan. Was the residential
I
more
don't
south?
understand when this, one, where is Thimble Creek? 2,
What happened?
I don't know, we lost
got rid
the
of me.
video.
Yeah, I
Huh?
turned off the presentation. I can turn it back on if you need to.
Well, because we were looking at it, and I have it here. So I don't understand where Thimble Creek is, and if you're putting over trees,
That's down here.
it's, I mean,
That's it right there.
yeah. So it would help me to know where the creek is, to see how large, or whether there's already trees that that can serve that function and don't need to be taken, because it just seems to me that our piece, there's no creek way up there,
It's flat land.
and it seems large to me, and it doesn't seem as fair because the lower pieces are relatively
Off the
thinner.
cliff there.
Yeah.
Now, if you wanted to take what you're taking, about 7 or 8 acres out of our property, if you wanted upland habitat, you would stick that around the golf course's pond, enlarge that pond. Then you'd have what you could call what is it, Glen Echo? Flyway. with the new park.
Because Thimble Creek always it seemed to me was kind of in the center of our property, even though it's been covered over during certain types of the year. And I know way down deep, because I used to go down there as a child, but it was quite a hike to get all the way down there. And our property is relatively flat. So I don't know where this creek is that you're saying that is along this overlay that is this property is supposed to are supposed to protect.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we do have we have the creek, which is down the hill from your property, and we have already a natural resources overlay district that protects that stream and the habitat there around the stream from trees. The area we're talking about right here in blue is not within
Right.
that. So it's not close enough to be within the vegetated corridor in that habitat area. So what the city commission
Okay, so but that land that is all blue there, you guys called that the Thimble Creek overlay, correct?
The Thimble Creek is the name of the whole concept plan. And so we made up the name for what we call this blue thing. So the city commission directed us to create an overlay district to save or protect or require mitigation for the trees in the blue here. I just made up the name Thimble Creek Overlay District because it's in the Thimble Creek concept plan area. And I wanted to show that it was just for this specific area. It's not citywide. And so what we need to do is to figure out if we create tree protection standards for the blue area, what is that going to be? And is it going to be standards where if you remove a tree, you've got to replant more, or is it more than that? You've got to put a circle around these trees and you can't touch them no matter what. So where do we want to fall on that spectrum of tree protection or tree mitigation?
So when was this decided? When was this blue area on our property decided that this was going to be it? Or has that been decided?
June 16th, the city commission told me to write standards to implement this overlay district. So we got started right away. They wanted us to do it as quickly as possible.
Yeah, well, it doesn't affect the buildable land on the golf course at all.
Well, it seems to me that,
this is all a cliff there.
Yeah, I know. This is like a ridge. And our part of the overlay goes on the buildable land. It isn't following along the ridge as with the golf course property. And I would like to see it more follow along the ridge.
We're at this point, the commission has told us just to create an overlay district for the area in blue. And so we're not looking at changing the area that we're creating the overlay district for. We're just looking at what should the standards be.
So you're not willing to put it on the golf course down there around the pond?
There already is separate overlays for this whole other area. I can go back to this map. But so in other words, it's already protected through other things. So see all these color areas on the golf course right here. This is already, and here, those are already protected through.
Where are all the parks at? Where are the parks at? There's supposed to be 8 acres worth of parks.
I can talk to you a little bit more offline about the overlay or about the concept plan, but the parks run in a spine in a north-south direction. So,
well, our problem here is we have the school district that wants to eminent domain our property.
Yeah, we feel like we're really being squeezed right now.
Now, the golf course has exactly what the school district wants. Did you tell them that they can't go after the golf course because you want that golf course gone for to apply to make money off of your golf course?
The city doesn't have a golf course. We worked with the community since 2006 to create this concept plan in general.
You don't own the golf course on the other side of Molalla Avenue?
No, we don't own a golf course.
Oh, I thought you did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I can talk to you a
Okay,
little bit
well.
more about the concept plan and other development.
Okay, no, I want to talk to you about this. The Roberts property. How come that got kicked out of the Beaver Creek concept plan? I haven't got a straight answer from that at all.
Do you mind if I talk to you about that in a little bit offline, just because it's off topic with this specific
Okay, back on the topic. Like I said, we got the school. It's not going after the golf course. I'm afraid that if the what is that called?
The Beaver Creek concept plan?
What you're proposing, all this, what is it called?
The overlay?
Yeah.
Thimble Creek
I'm
overlay?
afraid that we may never sell that land, and that the city will come in here because they want to build out the golf course, which they can't do it right now unless Ardent land is gone. They're going to come and condemn that property you got in blue to make access to Loader Road.
The city won't develop any property in the concept plan, but property owners may. And we're not looking at condemnation right now, but you're certainly right.
I just want to make it clear.
I guess the question that my brother's trying to ask is there any point in time whether that overlay in our corner can be changed by the city for another use and the trees not preserved?
I think that is perfectly aligned to what we're trying to figure out today, which is, what does this overlay look like and what does it allow you to do? Is it a place where you can't build anything at all, or is it a place where you can build as long as you mitigate by planting additional trees? And so that's where I'm looking to the Natural Resources Commission to provide, or committee to provide some direction on how we have this. So I'm glad that you're here tonight to participate. This is just the very first of what I'm sure will be a lot of conversations to figure out how much should this blue area restrict development.
Basically, all we're here today to discuss is that there's a number of trees in there that you guys would like us to preserve. Now, some of them can be taken and the mitigation can be planted elsewhere. And there can be other things built in and around the trees, is what you're saying.
It depends on what the NRC's direction, and then ultimately what the city commission adopts. And then these pictures earlier, these are from Wayne today. So these should be a general sense of what the property looks like on your part of it.
Well, I'm just concerned with eminent domain, and it's scaring the hell out of us.
Sure.
Yeah, we're not too happy about the school district.
In fact,
we just feel like, our property has gotten the industrial land, our property has gotten the commercial land, our property has to bear the heaviest amount of the riparian,
we're the government tit to the golf course.
But I guess that's just a concern of ours.
Can I comment just a moment?
Sure.
The city cannot do anything about claims of eminent domain by the school district. It's an independent governing entity. Am I right?
Yeah, it's an independent government entity. And also, I don't know that a school would comply with our concept plan rules anyway. It has mainly jobs up north. So we would have to take a look at that. I've not heard that the school district was interested in buying land within the concept plan area lately. I've heard that they've been looking outside of the concept plan area, certainly to the south.
Oh.
But, so I'm not sure where the school district's on, but I can send you our standards for what would be allowed on your property.
Well, I was going to make a suggestion. I presume that the school board has a public time for public comments for things not on the agenda. I think they could go to the school board itself and determine if the interests that they are concerned about exist. I think I remembered in the past there was some interest on the school.
Oh, it exists, all right.
Yeah, there's this.
This is not, I'm ready to have my lawyer draw up a letter of intent to sue.
I can find the contact information for the school board and pass it along if you like. But
Well, we're talking to their realtor, even though I can't get a confirmation that the guy is the realtor, and he was working with that developer, Randy Myers, and, just causing all sorts of trouble, saying they'll keep, if we signed a contract with him, he'd keep the school district off our property. So I don't know what's going on, but this guy says that he's going to be meeting with the school board. His name is Rise Conrad, and he's a realtor. And I don't know. It's just really pretty. We're just feeling pretty upset over here. Yeah. Yeah, we're just kind of upset with all of this right now. Yeah, they don't want land, right against Beaver Creek Road, and they want. So here, we're both sides. One side it's the environmental side, and the other side it's the school district, and we've got to figure out and find buyers that are interested in industrial and commercial property, and everybody wants residential. This is just really a rock and a hard spot for us here.
yeah, I'd be happy to chat with you guys more about this. I think.
But I mean, if I personally love trees, I've rather keep trees. So all you're saying is this area needs to keep the trees, and those that have been determined to be not invasive trees and things like that.
Yeah, I think the question that we were looking for direction for is the city commission said that they value those trees in that location. And so should we just say that you can
So they went out there and they reviewed those trees and they determined the species and everything?
They did not. We haven't actually even reviewed the trees since 2008. So we don't even know if they're still there. And according to Wayne, it sounds like some of them are gone and some of them are there on your property. And the golf course is still assessing how many are still gone or there on theirs. So the question is, if the city values the trees and we have the ability to regulate it, should the regulations just say you can remove a tree as long as you replant additional trees, or should the regulations say you can't even remove a tree at all?
Laura, Laura, I've got a question of you. It looks like this overlay that you're putting forward is what sounds like the recommendation, meeting the recommendation that was coming from this committee. Is that true?
Yes, it is.
That's what I thought. I just wanted them to make sure that they understood we actually made this recommendation to the city commission.
Yes.
On the tree part, on the overlay part.
And we
on
did,
the overlay, but
did.
you didn't look at the trees, so you have no idea what kind of trees and what is there exactly.
We made the recommendation based on the remote sensing data, the maps, and the overlay districts. But we also recommended that we do a site survey and look at the species on the ground and really assess whether this is valuable trees or whether they've been degraded in the last 10 years. The preliminary surveys were done.
Yeah, that's
well,
right.
I think that would be an excellent idea. I mean, because we don't know what we're talking about. I mean, there may be a few trees in there that really fit the bill, and there may be other trees that are, either damaged or diseased or a different species. I mean, I don't even know. I know there's some Douglas fir out there, but there's a lot of other trees because at certain times of the year I can see the mountain a lot better than.
Yeah, I had sent Wayne a couple of emails. The city can't go on your property without your permission, so we really can't do any inventories unless we're granted the ability to do so. And we also don't have a budget to do any actual inventory, so it would just be us looking at it and taking pictures of it and things like that, and using the expertise of the Natural
You want more
Resources
pictures?
Committee.
I got a lot more pictures.
Well, I think it would be helpful for all of us to look at, but I guess the important thing now is that the overlay can't be changed. There's no adjustment that can be made at all. Am I clear?
The City Commission told me to implement those boundaries. The City Commission's ultimately going to be the one to choose to adopt this in whatever form that takes. So my direction from the Commission is to write code to implement the boundary that they've agreed upon. So they can certainly change it in the future when it gets to that adoption stage. And we'll make sure that we stay in contact so you're aware of where we're at in this process.
Well, I have no problem with you coming on the property and looking at the trees. I can be with you.
Maybe we could do a site visit for NRC if we do a small enough group or something like that. If we wanted to do, since the city really is going to rely on Pete and his expertise as well as NRC to sort of help us in this assessment.
Pete, do we need a motion from our committee to do the site visit?
Yeah, I think that would be good.
I so move.
You have a second?
Okay.
Seconded.
Okay. So I'll call the roll. Mike Hamilton,
Yes.
Nancy Broshot,
Yes.
Chris Reaver. I see you nodding. Devin Pilney,
Yes.
Yeah.
Doug Neely.
Yes.
So
They're doing the vote.
motion to support a
Do a
site
site
visit to the Hall property to take a closer look at the conditions of the trees that are there with their permission.
The golf course, if we can get it too.
And,
Yeah.
and the golf course. Yeah. So
Thank
we'll
you.
need to
Okay, so I'd like to be with you guys when you do this.
Yes.
yeah, absolutely.
So
Right.
are you guys going to get back to us on a date, or is this
Yeah,
something
we'll
you
need
can
to
set up
figure out
now?
a date and a time. I'm not sure if we'll need to provide public notice of it because it is the entire committee and they are a public body. Generally, when there's discussion about things that are going to be potentially regulated, we need to provide public notice of that site visit, but we can do that.
Okay. All right. Well, then I will look forward to hearing from you guys.
Okay.
Thank you, Wayne and Kim, for allowing us to come on site. That is very helpful. We were sort of working blind a little bit there.
Well, I think it would be helpful to us too, because I'm sorry, but for me, it doesn't make a lot of sense if you haven't seen it. How can you determine that the trees there are the ones that you want to save or want us to protect?
Mm-hmm.
But don't leave the phone just yet, because I think we're looking for some general direction, or we can have the direction after we do the site visit as far as where the NRC stands on the level of degree to which we regulate the trees. Is it you can remove it if you mitigate it, or do we want to move towards the density transfer area where we put a boundary in it and then they switch densities, or are there other options on the table?
Cooler, if I might ask you, would there be a benefit for us to see the site first before we gave that direction?
It's up to you. I mean, maybe if they're higher quality, you might want to move towards the density transfer. I could see that scenario. Whereas if they're a species that you are less concerned about, maybe you're okay with just the regular tree mitigation.
Yeah, and I think it would be good to point out the original letter that came from the Natural Resources Committee was focusing on the problem of forest fragmentation in urban areas in general. Not necessarily just individual trees, but also the habitat associated with them. So I think that we should talk a little bit about that. But
Well, you have the
on the
perfect
site visit.
habitat around that pond down on the golf course.
Well, I think,
If you want to see bird life, it's a magnet. It's like an animal city if you build it right.
No,
And you'd have a flyway from the Oregon City golf course all the way across down Moala, past the new park, and you'd see all kinds of birds. They'd be nesting there. Trust me, I did a job at a house that person had a flower pot out on their front porch. They were off a golf course, and it had baby ducks in it, right by the door.
I'd like to comment on why we did this, though. There are two areas that we identified as natural habitat that we were going to protect. But we felt that there needed to be a corridor connectivity between those two habitats. So critters and so forth could fairly easily move from one of those areas to the other. I think that was the purpose of our discussion of the overlay. That doesn't mean that there are other habitats that might be good, but the specific reason was to connect those two areas that were previously identified.
Well, I'm good with where the spring is. We have a year-round spring down here. I didn't plan on doing anything in there. It has a good mixture of trees,
and it's a deep
cedars.
ravine, so it's, you know.
It would make a beautiful park setting.
The thing is,
But yeah, the other part of the site.
if we go out there and see the site, we might make some recommendations as to the width of the corridor itself. But I think that would be the real benefit from us going there and actually not, Laura, unless you're under some real timeline here, if we could get this done in the next
No time.
week.
No, we're retired.
Yeah.
The older you get, the less of a hurry you're
Our
in.
next meeting. And first of all, let me say, Laura, I'm so pleased the commission has listened to us on this particular thing. But I think we'll get a better feeling for it if we could actually take a look at it, see if the width makes sense, and so forth.
Well, I'm a big Ducks Unlimited guy. And I tell you, that's the way to go. I
Well,
want wildlife. If you build it, they will come.
That's right.
All right, I'll
Good point,
work
Lauren.
with Kim and Wayne on and with our city to make sure that we meet all our social distancing and size requirements to do some type of site visit.
It might be good to have city commissioners along on that as well.
I would like not to do that. I mean, if we're going to make a recommendation, I think it's
Okay.
actually it might even be an issue of ex parte contact.
Yeah,
If
that's
they're going
true.
out there
Yeah,
and
good
talking
point.
to us,
Yeah.
first of all, what they're saying might influence us in a way that otherwise, but also I really think it almost goes to the ex parte contact.
Well, ultimately, this would be a legislative decision, right? So I believe that ex parte isn't an issue on a legislative issue. But yeah, it's a good point, Doug. Mhm.
As the group gets bigger, it gets harder to do social
No,
distancing.
you're quite right.
If we're all 6 feet apart, I want to make sure everyone can hear.
Yeah.
Mask on and be slightly closer.
Bring a megaphone.
All right, well, thank you everybody for your clear direction.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Wayne and
Y'all have a
Kim.
nice day.
Yeah, thanks for
You
coming.
too.
Bye-bye.
Any other discussion? Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Again, Laura,
All right,
I
thanks.
appreciate,
Thanks.
we kind of gotten, the initial reaction when that was presented to the city commission was rather negative. I'm really appreciative of the fact the commission and the staff has pulled this together. I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, we were feeling like a pinball going between different
You are.
because the planning commission said no and you said yeah, and then all of these things. And
Well, that's politics for you.
Nancy, we finally spelled your name right.
Yay!
Sorry. We've been a little overwhelmed with work, if you can't
Well,
tell.
much worse than that in the past, so.
But thank you all of NRC members for all your hard work on this. I think particularly in the last little bit, we've been coming up with really good stuff out of NRC. So it's been nice to see you guys
Great.
flourish. So,
Yeah.
okay. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Laura.
All right. So the next item we were going to talk about is our work plan, and I didn't want to get too bogged down in the the current work plan. I really just kind of wanted to have more of a free-form discussion about it.
I couldn't find
yeah.
mine.
What's that?
I couldn't find it. I got one of these.
Yeah.
I don't know where it is.
Because circumstances have changed significantly with COVID-19 and the way we do meetings and that sort of thing. I don't know that it changes our overall direction, but it's certainly going to impact the city commission's goals with respect to economic development and that sort of thing for the next biennium. I can pull up the work plan on my screen and just take a quick look at it, and then we can turn it off and talk about it. How about that? Okay. Wherever it is. Okay. So now we have this new packet system. So the entire packet is one big long document.
Yeah.
So the current work plan does have quite a few items that we probably can't accomplish in 2020, but we do go out to 2021. I know that you all have raised the issue of climate change with respect to how that is impacting communities of color and disadvantaged communities as well. We're starting the comprehensive plan update. We're going to be looking at entirely new goals and policies associated with natural resources goals for the comprehensive plan. And so just bear that in mind. I don't believe that we have any goals and policies in the current plan addressing climate change. The goals and policies in the comprehensive plan set us up for further action items and goal and steps that we can take that are concrete. So it's a 20-year plan, and it's going to have a lot of documents that will come out of it. So in and of itself, it's not intended to be super specific, but it will provide better guidance. So just quick, go back over what our current bylaws are. We're going to promote community involvement and conservation of natural resources within the city and its urban growth boundary in partnership with city, neighborhood associations, and community organizations. Responsibility 2 is to initiate recommendations and review updates to the comprehensive plan, codes, and policy as they relate to statewide planning goals that are integral to our mission. Number 3 is receive notice of and comment on land use applications. Number 4, conduct orderly meetings that result in good communication between the staff, the policymakers, and city departments, and our community. And 5, coordinate with the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee on at least an annual basis. City Commission goals have changed a little bit since this document was done, so I'm not going to focus too much on those and just get into the activities. For responsibility 1, Part one was communicate with neighborhood associations and citizen involvement commission and the business community, promoting programs such as the Heritage Tree Program, Arbor Day, and such through presentations. Activity 2, strengthen and encourage participation in the Heritage Tree Program, which I think we've been successful of as far as revising the nomination process. And then what we're really working towards for trees in general is we don't have any money for incentives to preserve trees through and kind of do further outreach on that end. So that's something that we can keep on the work plan. And there are grants available from Oregon Community Tree Foundation and other groups that we could potentially tap into on an annual basis to do things like that. And so we could approach them for grants. Activity 3, support projects that improve connectivity between the Rossman landfill site, which is the property south of Home Depot and nearby, the end of the Oregon Trail Interpretive Center, the Cove, and the Willamette Rivers. And this is tied to certain strategies in the adopted comprehensive plan, as well as the adopted waterfront master plan and the downtown community plan. Right now, I don't know that we have a developer interested in that site yet. Typically, that kind of large-scale connectivity and recreation, would be done by developers. But if there are capital programs that we could tap into in the Public Works Department to achieve those goals, then we would work through with Public Works on that as well. Activity 4 was the Geologic Features Program to improve recognition of important and interesting geologic places in Oregon City, in particular Waterboard Park. And this would have a benefit for tourism and awareness of watersheds that we currently don't really pay much attention to, and like a lot of citizens may not know a whole lot about. So that's activity 4. And then activity 5 was to support habitat projects around the Cove and try to tap into whatever funding is available for restoration at the time that becomes a possibility.
Pete, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
What, in the commission meeting, did they talk about Waterboard Park and that additional property? And did they make any decision?
Gosh.
I can answer that.
Yeah, Doug, can you talk to that? I can't quite.
Yeah, a couple of letters were put in, and I spoke to Commissioner Frank O'Donnell at the today. In fact, one of the reasons I was late was he was there. He's actually at a work session asked to have this put back on the agenda to actually probably put it as an action item to go ahead and designate the park. That hasn't happened at this point.
This is the extra 5-acre piece that the armory was on, structures.
That where the armory is on is actually state owned, but the state, I think, is going to turn it over to the city because they don't have interest in it.
Okay.
But part of that is in fact Public Works owned.
Right.
And it's on that part. I think the commission will make a decision, and I might expect something within the next month or two.
Okay. So, all right.
Yeah, the commission struggles with items, how to juggle all the items that they want to put on the work sessions, but that's definitely on the list. So.
Okay. All right. Anyhow, that just a segue from our work plan.
Okay.
That it adds more work.
Okay. As Responsibility 2, comprehensive plan. I think in year 2 of the comprehensive plan update is when we'll be beyond visioning. We'll have a visioning in late 2020, which will be adopted by resolution of the City Commission. Then I'll be embarking on actually writing the comprehensive plan chapters. And I would anticipate that there are going to be some policies that have to do with this first activity, which is updating the water resource and wetland inventory. And it'll require significant money set aside to do that in the form of grants or general fund money. I don't know where that would come in, but it's something that we need to bring up during the comp plan process. Activity 2, support coordinated strategy for invasive species management.
On the comprehensive plan piece,
Yeah.
I believe they're looking to have putting together an advisory group in that process, and I think they asked for somebody from the Natural Resource Committee to be on it.
Yeah,
No.
Chris has been
Okay.
our NRC liaison
Good.
for the comp plan update.
Good.
Yep, I'm happy to do it.
No,
Y'all
thanks.
cajole me into it.
That means you got to make reports to us, you know.
Oh, yeah, I could be your
Yeah, just so you know, Chris, the mayor's going to appoint all of the project advisory team members next week on the 15th. And then I think the first meeting of the PAT will be scheduled in late July here.
That's good
So,
enough.
Yep. And we're going to get the word out as soon as possible. So on the invasive species program, there's a voluntary IPM program with Clackamas County that we're not party to at the moment. It would really involve Public Works signing on to that because they're the major manager for, along with Parks. I know that they do train, they do their training for herbicides and that sort of thing, but they're not necessarily attending meetings to learn best management practices in integrated pest management. So there's no real, as far as I'm aware, there's no real staff commitment to do that kind of cross coordination at this point in time. Is that something that this committee wants to pursue still? I think when Bill Clark was on the committee, he raised this, and there's certainly no downside to it. It's just sort of I believe it's a monthly meeting, and it's coordinated through the Soil and Water District and Clackamas County. But it's really just a question of getting the departments to the table, which is always the challenge.
Could the people going to the table be from the advisory committees?
I don't know, Doug. That's a really good question. I don't see why not, particularly if there was good communication between the department heads and that liaison. That'd be great. I think John Lewis would be the person to talk with more about this, and I'm happy to try to make that connection. But is there a volunteer? We don't have to decide that right now. We're just going through the list.
I'd actually like to see something done to get more information about invasive species that are really common in this area out to people who live here. I mean, my next door, the guy behind me, his yard is nothing but ivy, blackberry, and clematis.
Yeah.
It's like a jungle back there. And so, and there's herb Robert everywhere. I just think we need to make people more aware of these pretty bad, and Italian arums coming up everywhere in the neighborhood, and half my neighbors think it's really pretty and they're leaving it, they're pulling out the other plants and leaving those. I'm like, ah.
Oh no.
Yeah. So have somehow, the city has a website. If we could have links to some sites that have pictures of these invasive species. So if somebody didn't know, have like the top 10 invasive species or something like that. So people could easily look. I
Well, that's a
mean,
great idea.
also the soil and water conservation districts have good sites. Seattle has an awesome site, or King County does. I'm sure Portland and Metro have a great site. So if we
Mhm.
find a really good site, and I'd be willing to go out there and find a good site that would be appropriate for, you know, our area, and
Mhm.
give it to you if we could get that, maybe a link to that on the city website.
Okay.
Identification and mitigation, I would say, because
Yeah.
I mean, there's all sorts of those weeds that, I mean, they're there for a reason, right?
Yeah.
And so just chopping the head off is not necessarily going to get rid of
Right.
them. So
I'm actually digging up Italian arum spreads it, because I did that once in my yard, and I'm pulling up little babies everywhere. So
yeah, I'm
Yeah.
battling vinca and Japanese knotweed right now. So
Oh.
it's just the
Yeah.
worst.
yeah.
Yeah, we have problems, no doubt about it. And it's it's tied right into the stormwater program as well. So that would be a great idea, as long as our communications coordinator is Kristen Brown. So we should really involve her in this discussion, so that,
Okay.
you know, we can, you know, put together a simple site with the right links, and that has some presence and becomes a news item that has social media, you know, every quarter for the trail news. It's not in the trail news, but that's a major way that people get their information about city programs.
And I know the city has a Facebook page. We could also
Yeah,
have a
we do.
meet of the month or something.
Right.
I'm looking at the city of Portland, and they have a bunch of pages on invasive plant control. They have posters of, you know, with pictures. They've got, you know,
Okay.
plant lists. They've got weed profiles. Yeah.
I know
Okay.
Metro has some good stuff. Marion County Soil and Water Conservation District has a really good site.
Is there a, you know, invasive weed month or something like that?
I have no idea.
Seems like
look
there
that
ought to be.
It's from May until about October.
Oh, that one. Right.
I think it's January through December, actually.
Actually, it's January through December. Yes.
Yeah. I was thinking, yeah, awareness
Well,
month.
I know what you were getting at. So.
Yeah, I know. Okay.
You know, I'm wondering also if we could even reach out to nonprofits that coordinate invasive removal, something like Solve Oregon. I'm wondering how we would get on their radar and how we would get something like that initiated.
Well, Solve has done projects here, and you know, I know we've coordinated with them in the past, down at Abernathy Creek and that sort of thing.
We have Greater Oregon City Watershed Council is doing some work on the streams within Oregon City. Most of our effort is outside, but I mean, we took on a major project, which we pretty well controlled the invasives on Abernathy Creek Park, which is a small park that we acquired from FEMA money after we had the 1996 flood. And we had all kinds of invasives, and those have come under control.
You know, it might also be a project eligible for some grant funding from Metro Nature in the Neighborhoods program, because it's an awareness thing. And, you know, they have different grants available, education grants as well as project grants. So, but in and of itself, that would be a, you know, a pretty significant undertaking, just that one project. To get some grant funding to get, you know, the word out and brochures mailed to people and that sort of thing. But at least the grant can support mailings and design, that sort of thing. So that's doable. Let's see. Number 3, consider and advise on a natural resources annexation policy. Yeah, okay. We did amend the code to include some provisions for an additional factor for if annexation properties do removal of trees, then, you know, there is a code section that requires that the city consider that as a factor in approval of an annexation. There was a lot of discussion about how to approach that problem because we don't have the authority to regulate land that is not yet annexed to the city, that is under the county. And then, you know, and you adopt a prohibition on certain things, tree removal or whatever, such as Lake Oswego has done. It is kind of difficult to administer because you have to, the planning department ends up working with the property owner on a mitigation plan for up to 3 years after they've annexed into the city, and then they're not allowed to actually develop until they implement that mitigation plan. So it's a difficult thing to administer, but we did include that code amendment last I think it was over a year ago now. Consider and advise on the natural resource, tree protection, upland habitat code amendments as needed. So we've made quite a few changes, and I anticipate that we may be making more in 2021. I know we're not planning to amend our codes, but it does seem to be more and more of a frequent occurrence in response to community input. Responsibility 3, receive notice and comment on land use applications and projects within the city limit and the urban growth boundary. That's what we've been doing. And then review and comment on requests to reduce the natural resources overlay district vegetative corridor width and other significance to the overlay district standards. So example of this was the recent guidance from the NRC on the Kenema wetland addition to the natural resource overlay district. And that's been adopted. But I would anticipate that we are going to see some more of that type of thing as we develop the Beaver Creek Road area and other concept plan areas.
How does it work in reverse if you want to expand it?
Yeah, that's the thing. You know, we've got this one toolbox and it's regulatory. It's not, the planning department has just only that thing. And the incentive side, excuse me, my dog is barking. The incentive side and if somebody wanted to expand it, you know, they'd have to propose it as part of a development, like a planned unit development, and then there'd have to be a trade-off. You know, they'd have to want something in return. Additional density, you know, everybody wants to build single family detached because that's where the money is. They don't want necessarily be told to build attached units, etc. But frankly, with the issue with housing and the direction that we've been going with the equitable housing code, I think that the market will be there for those new types of units and the desire for more density, closer to amenities, closer to existing public infrastructure and that sort of thing.
Well, I guess the question is how it was originally defined, and you know whether standards for redefining it are appropriate in today's world.
Yeah,
you know, it isn't about just saying it's going to get smaller and that's it. You know?
No. Yeah, I mean, I think about that a lot too. I know it's like we've got the creeks that are daylighted and then they go into pipes. Is there a way where the pipes could become daylighted again and you actually do re-improve the habitat? First, it takes a willing landowner, and then it takes money. I think the original habitat that Metro required that all the cities adopt some sort of form of protection was based on an old photo set of remote sensing photos and the things that they did in 2003. So it has not been updated since then.
Part of the issue there on Thimble Creek is we're dealing with data layers. that often were generated at different scales. Geology is done at a different scale than vegetation types. It's different scale than terrain. And so there, you then end up with maps, and then you layer them on top, and people make decisions just based on those map boundaries and how they overlap or don't overlap. And it doesn't really say whether that boundary exists or it needs to be improved, through ground survey or better remote sensing applied to it, because it's now 20 years later, 15 years later.
Well, I'm going to bring back an old point. He mentioned Kanema wetland, and we saw the original recommendations from planning coming to us, and then they got rejected by the planning commission. And we did not have, we had seen that before the planning commission, and what did not come back to us. So we as a group never had a chance to comment on it, and that particular boundary was removed from a piece of property. So it's critical. Everything is based on the distance from the designated water resource. So we, at one end, we are a little bit more stronger and metro in terms of anadromous fish boundaries have to be 200 feet, but I believe it's 50 feet for other perennial streams. And then I think there's a different one for seasonal streams, I think. But maybe we ought to look at that at one of our future meetings. But the point is, it's just based on a linear distance, not so much on, and you go there and look at the vegetation and so forth later on. But the code really looks at that specific distance and then looks within that distance to see what happens. Isn't that correct, Pete?
Yeah, it's really looking at this linear distance that you mentioned. It doesn't really look at what the quality of that is. It does require that the invasive species be removed from the development site. So that's the one standard that we can require the developer to do. But removing all of the invasives from a site while you're actually planting only a portion of that area doesn't really make a lot of sense. So but the standard is based on whether it's a perennial stream, an intermittent stream, or a wetland, and it goes from 50 feet up to 200 feet. Based on, and then whether there's a slope next to it. So if it's in a ravine, then you measure from where the top of the ravine starts to level out. But the maximum it can ever be is 200 for a salmon bearing. And it's generally 50 feet for wetlands and streams, and then 15 feet for streams that are intermittent. I don't know if the standard is really working. It works for development properties, but it doesn't work, like Mike alluded to, it doesn't work for 90% of the projects that aren't in development. They're in a situation where there's unawareness on the part of the property owners that there is a regulated corridor there. So it really is something where we can get joint programs with the backyard habitat folks, and other nonprofits to try to get people to take care of their land.
Yeah, well, there could be a long conversation about what we're actually protecting. Is it just tree size? Is it just stream corridors and stream flow? Are there other species here that are under consideration that are important? Other elements of habitat? The commission saying that we're just protecting trees on those properties. Our letter really addressed habitat. It didn't address particular tree sizes, And it's biodiversity as much, but there's no language in any of our regulations about that. There is at the state level, and there is at some of the other administrative overlays for us. So
yeah, Metro has habitat protection.
they do.
Yeah, and we don't have any of that. So, that might be something for the planning
Do you mean upland habitat protection, Nancy?
All
Or
types
just-
of habitat protection. I mean,
Yeah,
you know, I mean, that guy's talking about a pond, but that's also,
Mm-hmm.
it is a vital habitat for certain animal species.
I mean, he's into ducks, but waterfowl, nesting habitat for upland
Mhm.
birds,
Yeah.
or
Yeah,
yeah.
you don't see many because there isn't much habitat left.
right, exactly, exactly.
Yeah. So the one overlay that we have, we have more than one, obviously. We've got the Willamette River Greenway as well, and the Natural Resource Overlay District and the Geologic Hazard District.
Right.
And they tend to overlap, especially the Geologic Hazard and the Natural Resource one.
Sure.
And then just by nature of them being slide areas and steep slopes, this geologic hazard areas remain
Kind of
undeveloped.
the low hanging fruit of conservation because, who can build on them? It's too
Right.
dangerous.
Yeah.
That's it.
This upland designation we have in the Thimble Creek concept plan, is this the first one that we've had actually?
Yeah.
So
It
that
is,
was
as long as I've been here.
This is our first effort then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, other efforts have come as part of, an actual development proposal where, well, I'll give you one small example, and it's a rare example. There's a subdivision up on Swan Avenue in Park Place where originally there were a lot of white oaks on that parcel, and they preserved, about a tenth of them in the corner in a tree tract by using Chapter 1741, which has a density transfer provision in it if you have a tree tract. And they were one of the few subdivisions that actually took advantage of that. And that was last year. And it has a conservation easement on it and requires that those homeowners take care of that area, which is kind of nice to see. But that kind of thing is currently in the code. It's just not something that's mandated. It's more of it's a rare thing that a developer will chew on that incentive and bite down, Responsibility 4, conduct orderly meetings that result in good communications. I think we've been doing more and more joint work sessions with Planning Commission and City Commission over the last few years. So I think this is a good thing, and I can certainly attest to the respect that the NRC now gets from the Planning Commission and City Commission, unlike it ever did before. So and we need to continue that.
We thank you, Pete, for being proactive for us. Really important.
Thanks.
Yeah.
NRC responsibility number 5, coordinate with PRAC on at least an annual basis. I don't believe this is in their bylaws, but it is in our bylaws. So, I don't think we did this did we do this last year, Doug?
We got together with Planning Commission.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I don't think we made presentations to the City Commission, but we actually got together with the Planning Commission.
Well, with respect to the heritage tree things, I think, there's going to be more emphasis on that. And with the focus on putting this policy together for tree removal on city-owned land, I think we haven't presented that policy to Parks and Rec Advisory Committee yet. But we will need to do that this year.
I would suggest that we try to do that with the Planning Commission, given the decision that they put forward in terms of that wetland delineation, which essentially disappeared on the one piece of property. And it was supposed to be 50 feet, and the Planning Commission said 0. And
they didn't base it on any real criteria too, which was fundamentally.
I think that's one item that we need to talk about to the Planning Commission.
Yeah. There was certainly, staff was like, what are you basing this decision on? It needs to be code-based. And they had nothing, frankly, and I was very disappointed in that. So look, yeah, I agree with you, Doug. It needs to be brought up. Okay, so that's running through the current list. What are people feeling in terms of things that we should change or add, or anything that we don't need on here for the foreseeable future? I think it's all.
I think the connectivity with Rossman's landfill and the end of the Oregon Trail and the Cove, because a lot of that is in such flux right now. I don't think we should get rid of it, but maybe put it on a back burner because it's nothing we can really accomplish until somebody comes to actually develop the Cove. Because
Yeah, I
a lot
agree.
of it hinged on what was happening with that. And if that's not going on right now, then maybe we should just not get rid of it, but keep it on a back burner until we actually have people to talk to.
All right, so activity 3 and activity 5 would be postponed until
Yeah.
there's developed.
Although waterboard, the 5 was more than just the Cove, but it also had waterboard work in there. So
yeah, number 4 was the one that deals with Waterboard Park. But
okay, all right.
So I think that one's more current than the other 2, 3 and 5.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. And the water resource and wetland inventory, we might want to revise that to acknowledge the comprehensive plan update that's underway. And so this would really be a 2021 recommendation.
Right.
Um,
If we've done 3 and 4, do we need to keep that on there? Like activities 3 and 4 for number 2?
no, we can take
Those
those
are
on.
completed. I liked seeing completed after something.
Right. So getting back to your original comment, Doug, about having a conversation with the Planning Commission, it kind of ties into this responsibility 3, activity 1, I think. So we should maybe expand on this activity to say, work with Planning Commission, or provide notice to the Planning Commission whenever there's a request to reduce NROD vegetative corridor, because those should be type 3 discretionary Planning Commission decisions and when they're asking for reductions. So we'll just make that change or make that addition.
And I mean, I don't know how you word it, but in the case we had before us, the Planning Commission making a decision that was different than the one recommendation that we saw, and making sure that comes back to us so we can make a recommendation directly to the Planning Commission on changes that they've made. I think that's where a problem existed.
Okay.
I don't know how you word that, or
Not just review and comment requests to reduce, but have input and
I want to be a requirement,
questions.
not a request.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I'll put some wording together that reflects that. You want it to come back to the NRC for further discussion if the Planning Commission reverses a decision or significantly alters a recommendation that the NRC has made. Okay.
I don't know if we made the recommendation. We saw what the Planning Commission put before us, and we basically agreed to it. And then the Planning Commission took action and then come back to us. I don't know if we formal recommendation or not.
Hmm.
But yeah, come up with some wording and you can take a look at it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. Anything else? Any new projects that people feel that we should add?
Do we
we have.
want to, not that I want to add things, but do we
Hmm.
want to do something about throwing climate change and trying to raise awareness?
Oh, I should mention that I think there's going to be a presentation by the city of Milwaukee next city commission meeting on the 15th.
Oh.
About their plan. So that's coming up. I'll make sure that you guys know about that. I
Yeah.
just happened to see it.
Because it'd be nice to put something at least in our goals and responsibilities that we're looking at it and trying to come
Okay.
up with recommendations for best practices to help mitigate or reduce or something.
Let's see. I think it would be under this responsibility right here if you were to add it, because we're taking 3 and 4 off. We could add it as number 3.
Yeah.
What do you want it to? In particular, review or propose policies that can be implemented at the local level to combat climate change.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. Great. I think that's everything we've got for discussion items. And now let's see. We're on to communications. Members want to go first?
I don't have anything.
I've got one. The Greater Oregon City Watershed Council, which I chair, we've finished a project on the, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, finished a project for invasive control on Abernathy Creek Park, and we hired a contractor to do it, Mosaic Ecology. They did a tremendous job.
Mm.
That was in cooperation with Parks and Recreation, with the Parks and Recreation program, since that's their property. And they've done some plantings. There were a few things they did that I wasn't too happy about, but in general, it's been a very good project. And I think there are other public lands in which we have invasive problems that, and I don't know whether it could come from the Natural Resource Committee or not, but one source of funding that the Natural Resource Committee has been involved in is doing some planning on what's called Scattering Canyon. And that has now been initiated. We contributed some money from grants that we obtained, but one of the sources of those grants was Oregon City's Metro Enhancement Fund. And I don't know if the Natural Resource Committee could come up with projects that it would like to see undertaken and make use of those funds. I think it's possible because those funds we actually directly paid out under a public works project. So it was a public works project that this was done, and it may well be that's another source. I think they meet, do they meet every year, don't they? The Metro Enhancement Fund Committee?
I think more frequently than that.
Well, in terms of awarding grants.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, every
And,
year for sure.
they've already done their grant awards for this year, but we might want to see if we can team up with either Public Works or Parks or whomever has property that is in fact environmentally important, and see if we can do some of this invasive removal. And I don't know if that could come from Natural Resources Committee or not, but as I said, the Greater Oregon City Watershed Council has done more than
Well, I
two.
don't, yeah, I think that's
on city
doable.
land.
I don't know all of the rules about how the
Yeah,
grants are
it may not
awarded
be
and that sort of
possible
thing,
for
but
an advisory committee to do it, but it's worth checking out.
okay. And with that, the contracting company was Mosaic Ecology for the Abernathy Creek project?
Yeah, did a great job. Got the
Okay.
basic.
All right. How much was the grant award for?
That one was not a city grant.
That was Greater Oregon City.
Separate grant, and I have to check back on that. It was a 3-year project, you know, because the invasives come right back, and so it's a 3-year project, but very successful.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Okay. So, just so you know where I'm at, the OC 2040 Vision Survey kicked off 3 weeks ago. I think we've got over 200 responses already. We've got a very large 35-member project advisory team. Very diverse, a lot of new faces that I haven't met everybody yet, but it was great to see. We got 54 applications for what was initially 25 positions. And then we realized that we needed to expand some of the positions to include greater diversity communities, color, LGBTQ community, community health advocates, and advocates for people with mental and physical disabilities. And we've been able to fill all of those with people who are willing to commit to the whole project for the next 2 years. And we'll have 10 meetings of the project advisory team. And I'm really excited about that. See what's next. Oh yeah. Community, we're basically what we're doing is we've developed something called a community conversations kit, which is basically a set of interview questions that anybody can take to their particular group and use, so that we can collect information and bring it back, and they're for the visioning process. And the basic questions are, what do you like about Oregon City now? And what do you want to change in the future? And so I haven't seen any of the survey results yet. I'm really looking forward to seeing it. And that survey will be running through the end of the summer. So
I'm curious, Pete, does that kit include any kind of recommendation on how to engage with people with COVID in mind?
yeah, it does. It's got some tools, whether you're doing a phone interview, it'll have some guidance on that. If you want to use a video Zoom conference, it's got some guidance on that. It's a draft right now. I think I got to get my comments back to the consultant about it by the end of this week, and then we'll send it out to the PAT so they know. And we're going to put it on our website too. So basically it's a downloadable thing. And yeah. Mm-hmm. Great. Thanks, everybody. Is there anything you want to ask me? It's a weird time, I'll tell you that. I'm having a hard time dealing with the Zoom thing. Even though it's great to see your faces, it's just not the same. I haven't been to Oregon City, physically been to Oregon City in over 2 months, which is very strange.
Wow.
Yeah.
I want to say that I think these meetings are working very well. We're pretty well sticking to our time using this mode, so it's working, I think.
Yeah. Obviously, we don't have much of an audience, but Maybe people are watching it on the YouTube, because these do get posted up to YouTube. I haven't seen any statistics. So.
I'm sure it's gone viral.
Oh, viral, totally.
We're trying not to spread it.
Yeah, we don't want to get overloaded.
Hey, Pete, I will tell you, so occasionally when I walk by your office down, your building down there, I occasionally see Laura Turway at her desk. Of course,
Yeah.
she's director, so she probably has to be there.
Yeah, the way it's working is we basically have half the department going in one week and the other half going in another. And so we can provide that FaceTime with the customers. But I personally am working from home through October 31st because of the health compromise.
You look out.
Yeah, I'll get a great deal. But if need be, I can make it down to Oregon City for sure. So
Linfield has decided to go face-to-face this fall.
Oh,
wow.
And I already called all of the staff back and told them they couldn't work remotely anymore, including some who were doing excellent jobs remotely. And they're
Right.
telling all the faculty they have to do that. So I have my letter from my doctor because I'm going to go back face-to-face, but if I find it's not safe, I'm going back to remote. I'll go in and do my labs because it's my lab space. I know it's clean.
Right.
And I can
Right.
limit how many people come in there. And I'm going to put a mask requirement in my syllabus, even though the college has one. But then I learned that there was a huge 4th of July party with students off campus last weekend.
Oh,
Just like,
geez.
oh my God.
Pete, I don't know. I don't know if you can do it or not. Whether it's security, is it possible for you to send the list of the members along with their contacts to
Oh,
us?
yeah, sure.
If you
I
would
thought
do
I
that, I'd
sent you
appreciate
that. Yeah, I can do that.
Pete, I was just looking at that and you should probably just take my work phone number off. Because even
Okay.
if I'm at work, my cell's going to be easier to get a hold of me than my work phone.
Just keep your cell on there.
Yeah, keep my home and my cell. But
Okay.
there's a work one at the top. Just delete that one.
Okay.
Thank you.
I've got some good news to announce. It doesn't
Uh-huh.
directly affect us, but it's kind of tangentially related. I found out through my office earlier this week that the city accepted a bid to build the improvements at Latourette Park.
Oh, cool.
Oh, good. All right.
Awesome.
Yeah, so that's kind of a major milestone. I know that whole effort started just at grassroots level with like a Girl Scout troop.
Yeah.
All voices in the community, begging the city to do something with what was essentially a giant piece of pavement. And yeah, hopefully.
That's really neat.
That's
Yeah,
cool.
like
I'm really
months time, we'll
excited. I saw some of the conceptual drawings, but I haven't seen anything recently.
Cool.
What's it going to be like?
Well, I can't say that there's much habitat improvement.
No, too bad. They were going to open that whole stream up and make it a.
Oh, they're still doing it's all simulated though. They're going to put in a dry creek bed
Oh, okay.
as a stormwater facility and adding a little bit of vegetative material. But for the most part, it's just going to actually be usable space for people in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Amenities that are worth something.
Mm. Yeah,
Well,
one of those.
I taught my granddaughter to skateboard there, so it was pretty good.
I found out that there's a house across the street and it's not an old house, but the guy has a rose bush that's probably 20 feet tall and it's a Cecil Brunner. It's literally huge and he's carved a tunnel through it. So when you're walking down the sidewalk, and I started talking to him and he said Latourette planted that rose bush. That rose bush is over 100 years old.
Oh, wow.
Are you kidding me?
Oh.
Would it qualify as a heritage tree?
I was thinking, do we have heritage bushes? I mean, because and he's like, if you want a cutting, the guys across the street has a cutting, and because roses do cuttings really easily. I'm like, well, cool.
Is it a 5-inch diameter?
We'll put it on the table.
I've seen rose bushes with pretty big. It could be. I don't know. You can't find the diameter, so.
Funny. Yeah, one of those Girl Scouts is going to be on the project advisory team as a youth representative.
Oh, no kidding.
Lucy Mackay.
That is excellent.
Yeah, I was excited.
Yeah, good for her.
Yeah. All right, Devin, you got anything?
Sorry, I was finding my unmute there. Just surviving a 3-month-old right now. He's currently in sleep regression mode, so it's like every 2 hours. So.
You poor guy.
It's not that bad. At least he's smiling. So, but yeah, that's it.
All right. Well, glad we could all get together. All right, so I'm going to update this list and send it around, the activities list, and we want to be able to share that with Planning Commission and City Commission as a news item, so they know where we're headed. Okay, well, thanks everybody, and don't hesitate to ask me or any questions or send me any information that you think should be sent out via the communications coordinator, Kristen Brown, because she can always post things on social media.
And let us know about the possible dates and times for going out.
For the
there.
site visit for
I'm
the
looking forward.
halls.
We could get
Yeah.
out there and find a piece of crap. So.
Yeah, I think I can still work a diameter tape.
I got my DBA. I got a bunch of DBA tape. I got enough for all of us because.
Oh, awesome.
Good.
Yeah, I'd definitely be interested in tagging along for that.
All right.
Yeah.
You know, maybe for the next meeting or sometime,
Mm.
we talk about trees, and of course, Mike's talking about habitat, and whether, you know, if you have down trees and so forth, they produce habitat too. Do we have, I mean, how to take a look at the broad aspects on these overlay districts in terms of the nature of the habitat to make sure that it covers the whole bio realm there of what lives there.
And dead trees are wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just read that it's probably better we call them habitat trees now instead of dead trees.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
when you're doing the backyard habitat certification and they're giving you the point score on that, if you've got a snag, so I've got like a snag in the front end of my yard, it gives you points because of the habitat that creates. So it's pretty cool.
Yep.
Okay, yeah. Cool. And I think in the next meeting, I will have an update for you on that. Sorry, not that program, but the Friends of Trees program for the fall planting. And they also want to do a pruning workshop. They're actually under contract to do a pruning workshop, which they haven't done yet because of COVID. But that's something else that we wanted to do because of there seems to be a problem with improper pruning. So,
No kidding.
yeah. Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
welcome.
Have a great evening.
You too.
Hang in
Take care,
there.
guys.
All right.
Everybody.
Good seeing you guys.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.